You're listening to the Next Level Sports Podcast, episode number 9, featuring Dr. Will Horton, NLP trainer, drug and alcohol counselor, where today we're going to be talking a little bit about the options available if you or somebody you know is suffering through addiction. Let's do it.
Welcome to the Next Level Sports Podcast. Take your game to the next level today by learning mental skills from top-level coaches and professionals.
And welcome back to episode 9 of the Next Level Sports Podcast. My guest is Will Horton, and this podcast is not long enough to list all this man's accolades. So let's sum it up as quick as we can. He's considered to be by many the world's leading neurolinguistic programming trainer, NLP. He's also a licensed psychologist, a certified alcohol and drug counselor, and a master hypnotist. Will is just an awesome guy. An interesting fact, he's one of the few non-law enforcement people to be asked to attend the FBI Crisis and Hostage Negotiation course at the FBI Academy. How cool is that? So Will helps people overcome addictions as well as improve sports performance, lose weight, quit smoking, the whole gamut of stuff. And just a wonderful guy, a funny guy. There's going to be a lot of great information because he's going to share his personal story as how he overcame alcohol addiction. So let's get right into it. My interview with Will Horton.
My very first experience with hypnosis was in high school. I had a book, it's still in print, by the way, called Hypnosis for Change. And I read it. I thought it was cool. So I read it, and I read the script in it to someone, hypnotized him, scared the shit out of me, right? So I didn't, but what I did is then I went and made some tapes. And back then it was reel to reel and then a cassette, right? And I would listen to them every day, mainly for sports, because I played football, wrestled, ran track, did that kind of stuff. So I always wanted to do that. And I really liked it. But it kind of got put on the back burner. And after high school, is when I really started developing a drinking problem, even though it was mentioned to me, but I didn't think anything of it. Then after high school, I went in the service and had the chance, was in line to go to West Point, joined as enlisted to go be a helicopter pilot. And I was doing that. But anyway, alcohol, my addiction was alcohol, took that career opportunity away from me. I did my time in the Army and got out, but I kind of kiboshed going to West Point. So then when I get out of the Army, I decided I want to be an actor, which was kind of interesting because I'd never seen a play. And I want to be a stage actor. I swear to God, I was the guy, if you ever watch Glee, I was one of the drunken football players throwing drinks on those geeks, right? So anyway, I decided to be an actor, and I get into one of the best acting schools in the country in New York, and was doing quite well, and drinking took that away from me. Now, fast forward a couple years, I decided I wanted to quit drinking, and I couldn't. So I ended up going into treatment, and I really liked it, but I really couldn't quite put everything together and stay sober for any length of time. And then I stumbled across someone who, in part of the treatment, they called it creative visualization, but it was hypnosis with some really cool NLP techniques. That turned my life around. It all made sense to me. It was almost like an epiphany where it's like, this makes sense. So I started studying it, started volunteering, doing alcohol and drug counseling, and, I never stopped doing it since then. So that they kind of go together, what got me into it. And so it was easier to take NLP training back in the beginning. There was no hypnosis training. But I've done it ever since. Then I did go back to school and get my doctorate in psychology, but it's still one of my passions, hypnosis for addictions, NLP for addictions, and performing arts. You do the sports. I love performing arts. So that's kind of a little bit of my backstory.
Very cool. And you went on to run several clinics as well.
Yes, because I also got the clinical background. I worked inpatient, outpatient, adolescent. I was the clinical director for a psych unit with some addiction stuff for a Florida State prison. I did a lot of that up in Cook County, Illinois, when I was up there. So I've been in the field pretty regularly since 1985, 86, and I've seen a change. Unfortunately, I always say, as we've seen medicine and psychology change and grow, unfortunately, alcohol and drug treatment has not really changed much in 60 years. And so I've tried to bring the NLP and hypnosis into treatment centers, and I have to some limited effectiveness.
And now, do you think that they're just kind of stuck in that pattern of this is what works, we're going to do this, and they don't really think outside the box? What do you think there hasn't been any advances in that field?
Well, I think it's that, and it's much like why you don't really see hypnosis and NLP in a lot of the graduate schools in psychology. You can't really teach graduate psychology unless you follow a theoretical orientation, whether it's, cognitive behavioral or Freudian or Jungian, whatever it is. So they're not going to hire a guy that's from outside their group. And that's the same kind of thing that happens with the treatment centers. They kind of fall into two categories: 12-step treatment and non-12-step treatment. And they don't want anything new. And honestly, to be brutally honest, there's a lot of money in people not recovering.
That's true. Yeah.
And in fact, here in Florida, there were some places that got in trouble because they would actually set people up to relapse so they could go through treatment again.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And you said when you were younger and in high school, there were some warning signs that maybe you should have picked up on. Hindsight is 20/20. What are some possible warning signs for people to look out for if they're concerned about maybe if they have addiction to themselves or maybe a friend or family member?
Well, number one is the inability to say no once you start. And this seems to be true for everything, whether it's alcohol, which is still the most abused drug, right? Could be smoking dope. It could be pain pills. It could be anything. A normal person, I don't care what it is, alcohol, marijuana, even a pain pill, they can control it. They'll say, I'll have one beer, and they'll really have one beer. There's some genetic quirks we could talk about that for some people, they'll say, I'm only going to have one beer. But then once they have that one beer, it's off to the races, or smoke that one joint, or take that one pain pill. And so that's a warning sign. The other big warning sign, especially for alcohol and things like pain pills, the downer ones, is blackouts. When someone has a blackout. And a blackout is not passing out. A normal person, you hit a certain alcohol threshold, you should pass out because it's like an anesthetic. But a blackout is where you drink, or pain pills will do it too, and you're still functioning, but you can't remember it the next day. And the interesting part is, let's say you function for several hours in a blackout and you do something stupid, you get in a fight, all that stuff. It's not encoded in your memory bank. It goes against usually hypnotists say everything that goes on is like recorded in your mind. Nope, that's not true. If you truly have a blackout, you could put someone in deep hypnotic trance, the memory's not there. You could give them sodium pentothal, the memory's not there. A lot of people that don't understand it think, you just don't want to remember what you did last night, Ryan. And you're like, no, I honest to God don't remember. It's like if you didn't hit the record button on this.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I understand that back in the 50s, they originally diagnosed alcoholism as a disease because they couldn't explain that phenomenon.
Now, an interesting question that I've always had is when, if somebody, say, is afraid of something, they get over that fear. They never talk about their fear again. They're over it. When somebody overcomes alcohol and turns to sobriety, they always have that language that they're still in recovery. And I'm curious as to why that is. Well,
I think well, from the outside, because I get this a lot, right? And it's like, well, why after, like, for my case, over 35 years, people ask me, do you still say you're an alcoholic? I say, yeah, if I'm at a meeting or somebody asks, well, I'm an alcoholic, no big deal. Two things to remember. A, to me, what the word means is it just means to me, I cannot drink successfully. And if you reframe that, I could drink. God damn, excuse my language. I can drink quite well. but I can't drink successfully.
Okay.
That's what the word alcoholic means to me. I need to remember that, because especially alcohol or any, it's common. You go somewhere, hey, I'll have a drink. No, thank you. Are you sure? Plus, I always pick on alcohol because it's one of the only ones you have to justify not using a lot of times. I'll be at a banquet. We'll be at like the big conference in Nashville or out in Vegas. People go, you want a drink? No, thank you. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Oh, come on, you can have one. I don't want one. It's almost like you have to justify it.
Mm-hmm.
Other things you don't have to justify. Hey, you want some heroin? No, thank you. Are you sure? Yeah. So yeah, but it's a reframe in people's minds. And I think the difference is, from the outside, people that don't understand, it's for most people that say that, it's not a negative connotation.
Okay.
Okay,
that makes sense. Yeah. Now, when you were a teen in high school and developing that drinking issue, is there any differences between teens developing something versus adults developing something later in life? Is there similarities? Is there differences?
Well, yeah. And one thing they think now, a lot of it's a genetic predisposition. But what we know now, everything's changed in the last 20 years about what we know about how your genes actually work. You could be genetically predisposed to alcoholism and it never really fire off if you don't drink and you don't have the right things to set it off, if that makes sense. But one way to look at it is people go through stages, right? Addiction is not what people think, in my opinion. And people go through stages. When you're born, you don't drink. Your blood, you don't drink. Now your parents may drink, people around you, but it's kind of oblivious to you. And yes, there's a small subset that maybe in a real bad home life, but most people fine. But then around teenage years, especially here in the West, you hit those where you're going to experiment with drugs and alcohol, right? You go into experimentation. And as much as every parent says, not my kids, good luck with that one, it's going to happen. Now, some of the people that will experiment will like it and then become social drinkers, right, when they can. Some people, I have one of my family members like that, they experimented. They did not like the feeling. 50-something years later, they still don't drink. It's not that they can't. They just don't like the way it makes them feel. So they experimented and went back to being abstinent. But then most people go into the social use phase. They can drink, not drink, have half a drink, no big deal. Probably couldn't tell me the last time they drank sometimes. It's like, I don't know, where I was probably at a party or every Friday I have a beer, whatever it is. But they're social users. But then what happens, and this is good for the kids to bear in mind, but for some people, they go from social use to where they're abusing the drug or the drink. And what abuse means is, I'll use drinking, but this is true for marijuana, pain, everything, right? Gambling even. And what the number one thing of abuse is, someone's telling you shouldn't do it. Like in high school, your teachers, your parents, your girlfriend or boyfriend, they're saying don't use, so you have negative repercussions, and yet you keep doing it. So you move into that abuse phase, right? And a lot of times when you're abusing a substance, it could be something negative. You're going through, your parents are going through a divorce. You don't know how to handle it. And drinking makes you feel better, right? And you get along and you don't care anymore. So you start drinking. So, could be something like that. You have low self-esteem and self-worth. That was my thing. Even though I played quarterback, I was very gregarious and outgoing. I always felt like if you really knew me, you wouldn't like me. And I always felt like I had a hole in my heart. And the moment I discovered alcohol, I felt normal. And it filled me up. And I was abusing it, people telling me to stop. I wasn't going to stop, right? Now, it doesn't have to be negative. A lot of young people, they'll socially drink in high school. Then they go away to college. Like here at University of Florida, or where I'm from, the big party school was Indiana University, right? So you go away to college, you join a fraternity or sorority, and you spend the next 4 years drunk. You barely get through school, right? You're getting in trouble, but you keep drinking, woo, right? Now, a lot of those people, though, whether they're self-medicating for pain, like, whatever it happens to be, Or maybe something positive, if you want to call it that, like going to a fraternity or a sorority or going in the military where everybody's partying. When they get out of that situation, they go back to normal. They graduate college, they go home, they get married, or they get a good job. They go back to being a social drinker. It goes against what they used to think in addictions, right? They used to say, once you're a pickle, you'll never be a cucumber again. Well, these people go back to normal. We saw this a lot with it, something I'll talk about in a moment. But for a small subset, only like 5% to 10% of the population, they can't stop. They physically can't stop. And that's the ones that have a genetic predisposition. Now that group, the only answer for them is to either drink or use or be totally clean. They'll never drink successfully, right? And they think it's like an allergy. You know, my sister has an allergy, I think, to strawberries. I can eat them all day. Doesn't bother me at all. She gets it. She gets the histamine response. She gets sick, right? So it's a genetic thing, right? And if all the factors kick in, that genetic predisposition where instead of getting a histamine response, like you can't breathe, which most allergies, in this one, it manifests itself as you want more. You know, some people have it with sugar. You start having, you'll do quite well on cutting sugar out. And then once you have something sweet, you're off to the races. It's the same kind of thing in people's head. Now, what's interesting, this kind of goes with a study they did with rats, right? Where they took a rat and they got it hooked on drugs. And then they duplicate it with alcohol, certain drugs, cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and alcohol. And so basically you got it hooked by that's all they gave it. And then they took like a female rat that was in heat. So it's a male rat and it's in this cage and they throw in the female rat, right? The male rat doesn't pay any attention. It keeps getting high, right? They put in food, blow it off, keep getting high. So that's where they started the war on drugs. Drugs are terrible, right? And so we started that. But then some psychologists looked at this and said there's a flaw in the study. Rats are very social creatures, right? They're very smart. If you ever had to deal with rats, you know they're hard to get rid of when you get them in your house or in something, right? In Florida,
I've worked in boiler rooms in New York City. I've seen rats.
Mm-hmm. Well, here in Florida, you get fruit rats, right? And they're just there. They're smart and they're social. So what they did, they duplicated the study, got the rats hooked, but instead of dropping in food or mate or something, they took the rat out of the unhappy rat cage and put it in the happy rat cage, as they called it, where there were mates and kids and food. All the rats would turn down the alcohol and drugs, right? Even though it was right there in the same dispenser, they didn't want it. And they really didn't go through any withdrawal. Interesting, right? And it kind of coincides with America at that time when all this was going on. We were in Vietnam, you know, as we're doing this thing, tomorrow's D-Day, and people are thinking about that. But in Vietnam, at the height of the Vietnam War, we had about 500,000 troops in combat between 68 and 72. And alcohol was rampant. The military pumped alcohol in to keep the troops happy because it was an unpopular war. Nobody wanted to be there. Everybody was drafted. Wasn't like you were fighting for world peace. It's just like, I don't want to be here. So people were self-medicating with alcohol. There was cocaine, heroin, of course, because it's the golden triangle over there, right? So everybody was self-medicating, and America was gearing up for a problem that because of that war on drugs thing. What are we going to do with all these young guys coming back from Vietnam that are hooked on heroin or hash or drinking too much? And by the way, they've just spent 12 months in combat, so they're pretty hardened individuals. What are we going to do with them? Well, they geared up for it and nothing happened. Most of the soldiers, 90 to 95%, when they got soldier, sailor, airmen, and Marines, to be correct, when they got back, after an adjustment period, there was a slight adjustment period. If they went back to a happy home life or a good, where they were welcome back, they went back to normal, even though they just spent maybe 12 or 24 months in a horrible situation where by clinical definition, they were addicts or alcoholics. They come back, they go back to normal. Now, a small group couldn't stop, about 5 to 10%. And it was higher with people that came back to situations where there was no hope or no future, right? Like you live in the inner city, there's no jobs anyway. You come back, your girlfriend's dumped you, they stole your car, and now you're like, those, which would make sense. And if you think about it, we pulled them out of the unhappy rat cage of Vietnam. If we put them in a happy rat cage and they were adjusted, they went back to normal. And when those studies came up, that changed how I thought about addictions. But the unfortunate thing for like especially younger people watching, if you're experimenting with drugs and alcohol, that's a normal thing, But if you're starting to experience some negative impact from it, you don't know if you have that genetic predisposition until it's kicking your butt, right? And so then you want to look for those warning signs, like, can you control it? So if you really say, I'm only going to have one drink, you only have one drink, and you don't feel deprived, it's like no big deal, right? Can you just not drink or not drug? Going to a party, I'm not gonna smoke a joint tonight, or I'm not gonna drink, whatever, right? And if you can't, those are some warning signs, And if it has to do with alcohol or like pain pills, if you've ever experienced a blackout, that lets you know there's something going on that doesn't happen to most people, right? And it's not about blame; it's just the way it is. So that's my thing on addiction. And then, but for 55, 60 years, they only had the one approach, which was once you had this problem, this was the only answer, right? And now I know it's more of a continuum. And it also said why you see a lot with people that they go into treatment or go to AA meetings or NA meetings, and they go for a while, their life kind of gets put back together, and then they seem to go back to normal, And of course, everybody it's kind of like religion. If you're inside the curtain, it's like, you can't do that. And they go, but they're doing it. You can't do that, but they're doing it, right? Well, it's just a genetic quirk, And then some people, though, they get into that and they get clean and sober, and they decide, I'm not going to test it. It's not worth testing, right? And then there's that, because, look at sports. How many promising, beautiful, talented, athletic people have destroyed their careers because of an addiction, And we see it. I always think of Darryl Strawberry, which some people would say he would have been one guy said he'd have been the best pitcher in history, except he had this little problem, right? Yeah. Go off on a cocaine binge for 3 days, doesn't do well, and then also too, and some of the people are abusing, especially we see it in sports, even down at the high school level, because you get hurt, especially in games like football or rugby or even basketball. That could be or wrestling, right? Or even like you say, baseball or softball. You get hurt and you want to play through the pain. So you supplement your treatment program with whatever, right? And then of course the inadvertent addiction that happens where something's prescribed. This is what happened to Brett Favre. They gave him pain pills because he was always hurt. And so he finally, thank God, he got out of that trap before it destroyed him. But so sometimes well-meaning people will feed this, right? And so this is one thing you have to self-regulate.
Yeah. And if somebody, either sees that they can't stop at that one, or they can't go to a party without having anything, or say a friend of theirs seems to be going down that path. You mentioned the traditional way. What are some different options that people have if they want to get help?
Well, usually it's like is traditional treatment where you go away for treatment for like 21, 28, 30 days. Those are shrinking. Or you go into therapy, right? Inpatient or outpatient therapy where you're at. And then the other one is some kind of alternative, like go to a hypnotist, find someone, if they understand addictions at all, boom. Because hypnosis can help speed up the recovery process. I would say, especially if you're in that self-medicating camp where you're abusing it, but maybe you don't have that clinical or genetic in your body, right? And so what it is, you're in an unhappy cage. And one thing, some of the research says people do better if they get better where they are. So if they go to even if it's traditional therapy, if they go to traditional therapy or to a hypnotist in their hometown, we can help them get better where they are, right? Because we also see people go away to treatment and they feel great, and then they come back, and guess what? The boss is still yelling at them. They flunked out of college or whatever it is, and they're not prepared for it. So there's some treatment that ideas say you do better if you get better where you are. So you make your cage where you are happier.
Yeah. And throughout your journey from when you discovered that you had this addiction to when you got into NLP and hypnosis, it seems that there's like that thread as kind of like one of your life works to help people get through this. And that's why you created a program like the Alcohol Addiction Solution, right?
Yeah, because again, it was about 10 years ago, I started looking around going, and here's what did it. I'd see people like they go into the 12-step program, go to treatment, and then they're in the 12-step program, which I like the 12-step program. I'm still active. I just kind of like it, right? And I'd see people come in and they do everything right, and they still can't get sober. And then I see people come in and not do very much right, but they get sober. So what's the difference between somebody that sobers up and somebody that doesn't? Given same kind of demographics as close as we could get. It's like, it's not necessary need. I've seen people come in, get sober. They're not in trouble with anybody, right? And then I've seen people come in that if they drink one more time, they're going to prison. They're in prison. It's like the guy I remember at the prison when I was the clinical director. He was serving, I was 4 to 7 years, and he got something in jail. So he's serving 8 for felony DUI with bodily injury. So it was his 3rd DUI, had a car crash, somebody got hurt, so he's in jail. And I remember I looked at him, I go, dude, that's how he talked. Dude, didn't you ever try like treatment or AA or something? And he goes, Doc, I wasn't that bad, right? I look around, there's the guard over there. I reach over, I pick his hands up because he was cuffed. I'm like, no, brother, it was pretty bad. Right?
Yeah.
So I would always wonder, what's the difference? This guy drank knowing he's going to go to prison, but he drank, right? And this guy gets sober. So it made me pull back and say, maybe what we're doing isn't working, or because it's also the only treatment, where they say, well, just do it harder. Ryan, if you got a sinus infection and I'm your GP and you come to me and I say, here, take some amoxicillin and an antibiotic, and you go back and you take it for a couple of days, you come back, it ain't working, I feel worse. They're not going to say, it's your fault, do it harder. They're going to say, okay, here, try a Z-Pack. Let's try something different. But because most of the people don't have anything but one tool, the only thing they can say is and it also makes the addict or the alcoholic feel worse, because now it's like, it's your fault you're not better, right? Rather than maybe it's the treatment. Maybe,
How big, if somebody tries to get sober and isn't successful, and then there is that kind of like, you failed, whether they put that on themselves or somebody else says that to them, how big of a role does that play in the success of them going forward? I think it could be a negative.
Big time, because now you felt like you failed, right? On top of everything else, right? Especially if, you see other people succeed, right? And usually they think one of the things about addiction is it's a disease of non-connection. You lose that ability to connect with other human beings, right? And including, they always forget, connecting with yourself. A lot of people self-medicate because they don't like the way they're feeling. There's 2 main reasons I think people abuse substances: to kill the way they're feeling because they don't like it, or to just feel better, right? And it gets kind of confused in there, but it's like, I don't like the way I feel, so I'm going to drink, right? And then it gets to the point for some people where they're drinking because it's the only way they know how to feel anything, right? And then if somebody's telling them they're bad, it feeds into that negative self-worth.
Yeah. When for the people that are listening that may not be familiar with the hypnosis NLP style, how would you describe hypnosis and NLP?
Well, hypnosis is where you bypass the conscious mind and go to the subconscious to make changes, because most of your life is lived on automatic pilot, right? When you first wake up in the morning, the first thing you do when you, as we say, come to your senses, right? As you're coming out of sleep, you're actually in a twilight zone there. You don't know what to feel. So most people reach back and go, who am I? They're doing this subconsciously. Oh, I'm so-and-so. But then they drag up other stuff like, crap, it's Monday. I got to go to work, or I got to go to school. I got to deal with this guy. I got to do that. So basically, you wake up every day, you bring your past and put it in today and tomorrow. So you're not creating anything new. You're just reliving your past every day, right? And then so you're doing the same thing. You get up, you go to the bathroom. In our case, you go get your cup of coffee. You sit there and bitch about the world, turn on Fox News or CNN, complain about everything, and then go to work, hate all your coworkers, and then wonder why your life isn't changing, right? And so what hypnosis does is start opening up those programs that you're not even consciously aware of. They were installed when they were just installed. The same way you learn how to drive a car. You know, if you haven't driven a stick shift in years and you suddenly had to drive a stick shift, you'd have to think about it. And that's kind of what hypnosis does, is open that up so you can change those programs and respond differently. So instead of your coworker or one of your classmates really upsetting you, they become neutral. It's like they're just another person. God love them, wish them the best, and you can go on. That's hypnosis, and it's done with trance, like relax and calm. If NLP hits the same part of the brain in a faster way just by using imagery, is the way I like to say, because it doesn't bring up conscious interference. You know, good example would be if I ask you, Ryan, think of somebody you really like. Okay, just really think about somebody you really like. Right? Okay, close your eyes now. Now picture them in your mind's eye. Where are they? Are they to the left, to the right? And the right. People at home can do this. So it's right there. There's the person there. Great. Now open your eyes. Close your eyes. Think about a person you really dislike. They're a pain. You avoid them. Got them? Let them pop in your mind. Where are they at?
Now they're in the lower left.
Lower left. Now if you close your eyes, take that person you dislike, move them to the spot of the person you like, and see what your brain says. Okay, open your eyes. What'd your brain say?
A little more tolerable.
Yeah. Or some people go, no, or whatever it is. And that's just because your brain codes information. That's all your brain's doing, is trying to keep you alive. We act like our brain's our enemy. No, the only thing there is trying to keep us alive. And we're not being, hounded by saber-toothed tigers or warring tribes anymore. So we create 98% of our own problems. Right? And so now our brains, instead of just keeping us alive, it's driving us crazy. And so what we need to do is begin to take control of that. Excellent.
And you want to talk a little bit more about the alcohol addiction solution program that you have?
Yeah, I came up with, it's called the Alcohol Addiction Solution. You can just go to alcoholandaddictionsolution.com. And it's a program that you do in the privacy of your own home. And it uses hypnosis, NLP, some cognitive behavioral therapy, some other stuff to help you make changes from the inside out where you are right now, right? And so your family, your friends, your coworkers, your classmates, no one needs to know that you're doing. And I decided to do that because, honestly, we're sitting here on Zoom. We're recording this. People are watching this on Facebook or on their computer, and the world's changing. And a lot of people are very comfortable sitting there and watching something online. Okay, fine. And the technology works if you do the thing. And I thought, well, and I think the days are going to be over very soon where people go away to treatment for 28 days, unless it's really like medical emergency. Let's get better where you are. Here are the techniques, here are the tools. And then, and so I did it that way. There's like 21 videos, a whole bunch of audios, book to read. And I always tell people you could use it with the 12-step program or in conjunction with the 12-step program, or maybe you don't want the 12-step program. A little aside, I always remind people, usually people that like the 12-step program, like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, are usually the type of people, they were very like bar drinkers if they were a drinker. If they were a druggie, they were the person always at a party. Those kind of people would do more better in like a 12-step program where you're going to meetings and you're interacting. If you drank in the privacy of your own home because you were terrified all the time, it adds to it to try to get out of the house and go to a meeting. So this one you can do in the privacy of your own home. No one needs to know you're doing it because there's even some people that don't want to go away to treatment because it's going to go on your insurance form. And I've had this happen to people I know. They went through treatment almost 20 years ago. They haven't drank or drugged since. They still have trouble qualifying for life insurance because it's on their record. They went through treatment. So therefore you're a higher risk. So, they make them pay more. And the guy next to him who just got drunk last night and barely got home. No, you're fine. Here's your insurance. So there's, and those of us that are paranoid about the government, sometimes you don't want them to know what you're doing.
Yeah. And also too, to be able to get better while you're continuing your life, to
reconnect with your boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, your job, your classmates, your school. The first thing when people do it, they notice, because I'll tell you my story too real quick, is like when I first sobered up, I said, I'm never doing theater again. Theater was part of the problem. There's all these crazy people in theater. Well, then after I sobered up and I was blessed to go back into theater, I figured out, no, I was the crazy person in theater. Most of the actors I hang out with now are very serious. They're into it. It's like they would never think about having a drink at rehearsal or, around a show. It was me. It wasn't that. And so then like people in college, if you have people, in high school getting ready to go to college, they think, is college the problem? Whether it's University of Connecticut or Florida State. No. If you go to those colleges and join a drunken fraternity, it's probably going to be hard not to drink or get high. But if you go to college and become, Pi Beta Kappa and that, a fraternity where they don't do that, it's going to be much different.
Yeah. Excellent. And if people want to check out the program, it's at alcoholandaddictionsolution.com.
Right. Yeah.
And if they want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, where can they find more information about that?
They can go to the website for my training group is nfnlp.com. nfnlp.com has my schedule, has everything I do. That stands for National Federation of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Because mostly I spend time coaching and training other therapists.
Excellent. All right. So if anybody out there is either struggling themselves or knows somebody that's struggling, there's definitely options for you, whether it's to go to a place for a month, whether to go inpatient, whether to do a program like what you have where they can do in the privacy of their own home. It's really important to know that there's more options than just, I don't know what to do, I'm going to keep, abusing this. Right.
And just reach out for help. It's out there. And the hardest thing you ever have to do is reach out for help. I give more credit to people that do that. Just had somebody call me, person in our profession, by the way, and they're like, they said, they've been wanting to call me for 2 years, and I'm like, well, I wish you would have called, because that 2 years you'll never get back. And especially if a lot of your people, the young athletes in high school or college or just out, you don't want to wake up 40 years old. So get some help, reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've never gone through it myself, but I could imagine that it's a very scary thing for somebody to want to reach out for help. They probably think there's something wrong with me, something like that. But I think from listening to you, when somebody does reach out for help, there is definitely an outgoing of support and a welcome into that, community. Like, here, we all want to help you. So for the people that are afraid to reach out for help, there's really, a lot of open arms available that want to help you get better.
Oh yeah. And even if let's say they decide to walk into a 12-step meeting, one of the fun things is people are shocked when they walk in, because the one group I go to, there's a retired Army general, a couple of corporate CEOs that are retired now, and one guy who's still a CEO, a couple of doctors. So it's like, some people sneak in thinking it's going to be Skid Row bums, and you walk around, it's like, wait a minute, that's a, retired 3-star general. And, it's like the addiction can be there. It doesn't mean you're not, because the big myth is, to do that, you got to be a Skid Row bum, where most people with an alcohol drug problem are highly functional.
Yeah.
But just think about how more functional they could be if they beat that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Will, thanks for all the information you had. It's to be able to get this information into the hands of people before it could ever become a problem, I think is something that's really powerful. And I think it's a great message that we're sharing.
Thank you. Loved it. And
all right.
If anybody has any questions, reach out.
Yeah. And that wraps up my interview with Dr. Will Horton. A tremendous story of how he overcame alcohol abuse, and really just giving you a lot of information of the options that are available to you. If you yourself are going through something, or a friend, a teammate, a family member you think may be going through addiction, there's a lot of great information there. And another thing, just a little plug for NLP. I was trained in NLP. Will is one of the best trainers out there. Everything from in-person trainings to online take-at-home courses you can do. Definitely check out nfnlp.com. It's really a way to get the edge both in your sport, in your personal life, in your professional life, how you communicate with yourself, how you communicate with others. The benefits go on and on and on. I highly recommend everybody, whether it's through Dr. Will or anybody else, find yourself a book on NLP, training you can take with NLP. It's really going to greatly increase the quality of your life and the quality of the life of the people around you as they learn the same things that you do. So check out nfnlp.com. Dr. Will, thanks for coming on. We'll see you on the next episode. Let's kick it over to the Zambonis.